There are over 17 different terrain features in Minecraft. From highest to lowest, we will get over every one of them. But make sure to stay till the end, because some things even the best players are not aware of. Hills and lakes. Hills, as you already know, can and will generate almost anywhere they want. It doesn't matter if it's flatland, mountains, or even oceans. But what do I exactly mean by oceans? Well, you might have seen a small block or two just peeking out of the ocean in the middle of nowhere, which is called an island. I have to tell you that this is actually a hill in the ocean, which, because of its height, forms a so-called island in the middle of nowhere. But why are there also lakes mentioned in the title? Well, that's because with enough terrain variations, they can form holes, pits, and sometimes those two things can make a whole lake, which you mostly use for traveling. And no, those aren't the lakes that have these flatland trees next to them, but the lakes that are actually surrounded by hills. But don't mix up hills and mountains, because that comes a bit later. Mountains are completely different from hills. Sometimes, like the wind-swept gravelly hills biome, it's called a hill, and also just those small and smoother hills in the plains biome, for example, are also called hills. So there are just so many variants of them, and they can get mixed up with mountains super fast. Mountains are just a tiny bit different from hills, mostly because of their height. One thing you probably didn't know, at least I didn't, is that some mountains can reach up to Y level 256, which is the world height limit, and if that happens, the mountain can just cut off completely flat, turning into some sort of flat plateaus. A great-looking generation can also occur, also known as mountain ring. And this is an example of a typical jagged peak mountain ring, but some people really are creative when it comes to those natural generations, because they will use their potential to the max, building all types of structures in them, just to make them look cool. But wait, what exactly is a valley? Well, I am glad you asked. Well, mountain ring was already one example. Long story short, it's a low ground between higher terrains. That's the whole explanation. Some people build roads or a river with a village between them. It really depends on what type of person you are. Cliffs are also included as mountains, but can get a whole section for them. A cliff is a normal mountain, except the mountain is just randomly cut with no explanation. It's like terrain hasn't been generated yet, which is mostly not the case. But it's not always bad, since they can also expose caves. Not like this will happen often, but it can, and that counts. A lot of them are exposed straight to rivers, so if you're lucky enough, you can potentially just fall into water and survive. But let me tell you, that's not always the case. They are pretty unique, and can't really be missed with any other. But the chances are never zero. You know when we talked about valleys, right? Well, Fjord is basically one, but instead of dry terrain, it's filled with water. And what is also different from normal rivers is their river depth, since they are much deeper than the normal ones. But Badlands, for example, this is the place you will mostly run into one of those. Sea level sits at Y level 62, meaning anything below that, there is water filling the gap instead of air. That's where most oceans, rivers, and lakes are generated. But don't get it wrong, not all gaps are filled with water. That's why caves exist. A fun fact is that we have also an unofficial second version of the sea level. We could call it a lava level, because anything under Y level minus 55, it will be filled with lava. But for this one, you will most likely need to mine or be lucky or unlucky, however you want to call it, to find one. Terrain is basically the first thing that happens when the game starts loading. After it's completed, the biome decorations happen. At the bottom, there is always bedrock spread through the whole world. Right above it, there was usually stone, but got replaced with deep slate ore, which takes place until Y level 0. Then we have cobblestone, no ores or caves, that all comes later. And on the top, we have dirt and grass blocks, then the whole decoration thingy comes in place. Bedrock is a bit different, and has 2 full solid layers instead of 1. And the pattern of it is fixed, meaning the same shape every time, no matter the seed. Which in Java is impossible, since every single seed is different. If you are playing Java Edition, I am sorry, but this one is for Bedrock, because Erosion is a Bedrock Edition exclusive feature. But it's not the end of the world, because although it's mostly in Bedrock, Java also have it coded in, meaning you can have a chance at finding one. This mostly happens when the top layer strips away and exposes the block beneath, most of the time stone, usually in plains. In Badlands, for example, it exposes orange terracotta instead of stone, or in frozen oceans, it replaces the layer of ice with air or just normal water. But like I said, it's rarely in Java Edition, so if you're looking for one, but you won't find it, it's not you, it's Mojang. Surface layers are the important feature, because this one will mostly have only grass blocks and dirt below it. in most biomes, but then we have biomes like desert, beaches, warm oceans, where sand replaces grass block, and sandstone replaces normal stone. Or in mushroom fields, where the grass just disappears and is filled with mycelium, and with mangrove swamps it gets even deeper, replacing the dirt with mud. Or more chill ones like ice spikes, which replace it with snow blocks. But like the last one, the Java and Bedrock do both have different types of layers. So again, don't get mixed up. Special surface layers are right after the normal ones, super important. It is also known as strips. But why? Because those are surfaces that don't only have one block for the whole biome. For example, the new dappled forest has a mix of coarse dirt with grass blocks. Old-growth taiga also has a podzol with the same grass mix. Snowy slopes have powdered snow on top of already placed snow. And sometimes they really do you dirty, because sometimes there will be only one block of powdered snow, but most of the time a whole layer of them, meaning when you fall into one, you fall for good. Windswept gravelly hills, for example, looks different between Java and Bedrock because Java covers it like normal, but Bedrock does it mostly in gravel with some grass peeking out. Mountain slopes. This one's about how steep sides of certain snowy mountains look different depending on which direction they're facing. In jagged peaks, frozen peaks, and snowy slopes, the north and east-facing sides expose a lot more stone, or packed ice if you're in frozen peaks, than the other sides. Only a thin layer of snow sits on top there, while the other directions stay more fully snow-covered. So basically, if you're standing on one of these mountains and one side looks rockier than the rest, that's not random, it's built into how the game decides which way is steep. Mojang basically gave mountains a bad side and a good side, like a haircut that only got finished halfway. Badlands terracotta. Badlands biomes have one of the most detailed surface setups in the game. Near the bottom, you get a layer of red sand with orange terracotta underneath it. Higher up, above roughly Y = 74, the top layer switches to plain terracotta, mixed in with something called Hoodoo terracotta. That Hoodoo terracotta is where the cool striped look comes from. Each world seed generates its own random pattern of colored terracotta layers. Red, orange, yellow, brown, white, light gray, stacked up like a layer cake, and each layer can shift slightly at different spots, so it's never perfectly straight. That randomness is why every Badlands you find looks a little different. Swamp marshland. Swamps and mangrove swamps get their own little quirk near sea level. Right around Y = 63, patches of the normal surface get swapped out for water instead, creating these shallow, scattered wet spots mixed in with the land. Mangrove swamps take it a bit further. The water reaches slightly deeper there than in regular swamps. Basically, it's why swamps never feel fully dry or fully flooded. The ground is just constantly switching between the two in random little patches. Hoodoo. Hoodoos are those tall, spiky rock towers you sometimes see sticking up in Badlands. They're made entirely out of that same Hoodoo terracotta we just talked about, which is why they carry the same striped, colorful look. Technically, every Badlands variant has the code for Hoodoos built in. It's just switched off everywhere except Eroded Badlands, which is the only place they actually spawn. And they can get tall too, sometimes over 100 blocks high. Iceberg. Icebergs are those massive ice formations you find floating in frozen oceans and deep frozen oceans. They're mostly made of packed ice, sometimes capped with snow blocks on top. They come in all kinds of shapes and sizes, from small chunks to giant mountain-sized ones, and some even have cave-like holes running through them, occasionally poking out the other side. Carvers. Carvers are what shape two specific types of underground tunnels, Carver caves and canyons. Carver caves are narrow, winding tunnels that actually have a clear starting point, a central room they branch out from. Unlike the more random noise caves we might cover elsewhere, they can show up at any depth and connect to the surface, other caves, or structures, and sometimes they're flooded with water or lava. Canyons are similar but shaped more like a tall, narrow ravine, shorter than Carver caves but with steep cliff walls and some natural variation along the edges. They can be fully underground, underwater, or exposed to the surface, and they can go deep enough to hit the lava level. Veins? Ore veins are different from the ore patches you're used to mining. Instead of small clusters, these are massive branching networks that snake through the terrain. There are two types, copper veins, which come with granite as filler, and occasional raw copper blocks, forming in the stone layer, and iron veins, which use tuff as filler with some raw iron blocks mixed in, forming down in the deep slate layer. They can be big enough to get exposed inside caves, but they'll never replace air or water, so you won't find one just hanging out in open space.